Hey everybody, what's up? Chad Wesley Smith here for Juggernaut Training Systems and Juggernaut AI. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the principle of overload. As with all of our videos here on the Juggernaut Training Systems channel, it is brought to you by the Juggernaut AI app. So if you want to get the smartest program for you, individualized in hundreds, thousands of ways based on your gender, age, strength, experience, if you're trying to gain weight, lose weight, what are your weak points in your lifts, all that, and it keeps adapting to you all along the way. Visit juggernautai.app for a 2-week free trial or the link down in the description. So now the principle of overload, which you can learn much more in depth about in the book Scientific Principles of Strength Training, co-authored by myself, internet celebrity Dr. Mike Israetel, and some guy who lives in the woods in Montana, Dr. James Hoffman. You can go real in depth there, but here's going to be a good overview for you. So the principle of overload is going to dictate that training must be hard enough to elicit a stimulus and to drive adaptation, and that it must get more difficult over time. So if you're training to get stronger and you're lifting 300 pounds now, in a month or 6 weeks or, a year from now, that training is going to need to be with at least 305 or 310 pounds to continue driving those adaptations and getting you stronger. So in the context of powerlifting, what this video is about, based on the principle of specificity, which I talked about in a previous video, which means that you're developing the underlying systems of success for your sport. Now we're going to talk about the principle of overload as it pertains to each phase of powerlifting and what is hard enough to elicit adaptations. So as we're looking at hypertrophy in the context of powerlifting, we're going to need to be driving volume up from week to week to week. That can be done in a number of different ways. We can do the same weight for sets of 6 and then 7, then 8, then 9, then 10, then 11. We could, do 5 sets of 8 and then 6 sets of 8 and then 7 sets of 8, all with the same weight. We could combine those in some way. We could do, a little bit heavier weight. So we could go for, sets of 8 with 400, then with 405, then with 410, then with 415, or combine those all in some way, doing more sets, more reps, and or a heavier weight. But that's what we need to look at is that we're overloading volume from week to week or block to block in hypertrophy training for powerlifting. I have a video about designing hypertrophy for powerlifting, just about that if you want to go more in depth there. But what we're looking at is mostly, 60 to 75% intensity for sets of 6 to 12 reps, a little bit higher ranges for accessory exercise, but 6 to 10, 6 to 12 reps for your squat, bench, and deadlift variations. Now, how many sets in those ranges you personally need is going to depend upon a lot of things, like how big you are, how strong you are, man, woman, how long you've been training, with some of those factors dictating that you're going to need more volume, some probably meaning that you're going to not be able to train quite as much. Those numbers that we're looking at there, and all of this overloading training needs to be done within your maximum recoverable volume. So a couple of volume landmarks that we have maintenance volume, MV, we have minimum effective volume, MEV, maximum adaptive volume, MAV, and maximum recoverable volume, MRV. So all of the training you do, the number of sets you do within these overloading parameters for each phase is going to need to fall underneath that MRV number and probably above, in most cases, the MEV number, which is going to be unique to you based upon a lot of factors. And you can try and figure out through a complicated series of algorithms, probably going to need, a slide rule, maybe an abacus to figure it out. I do have a video about that called Finding Your MRV, or just sign up for the Juggernaut AI app and I can figure it out for you. But, just one man's opinion. So we're looking 60 to 75% for sets of 6 to 12 reps in the primary exercises. How many of those sets? Could be a pretty big range. Giving you a clue, if you're really big and strong, it's probably more like 10 sets per week. If you're smaller, newer to lifting, it's maybe up in the more 20, 25 sets per week. But that's kind of the beginnings of understanding of what you'll need for hypertrophy, and check out the Designing a Hypertrophy Block video for more information there. Then as we move to general strength training, how hard, how heavy do we need to train for general strength? So while in hypertrophy, we're looking to drive up volume from week to week, now in general strength, we're looking to drive up intensity. We're trying to train heavier week after week after week, or trending heavier over a number of weeks. And those weights that we're going to be using are now going to be in the 70 to 85, maybe up to 90% range for sets of 3 to 6 reps. And typically you're not going to need to do quite as many sets in general strength as you were in hypertrophy, because these heavier sets are also going to be more neurologically fatiguing and typically a little bit more stressful to your joints, tendons, and ligaments. So if you were doing 10 sets of squats throughout the week in a hypertrophy phase, now maybe you're doing 7 or 8 sets of squats at these little bit higher intensity ranges for lower reps per set with general strength. So our overloading parameters are going to be 70 to 85, maybe 90% intensity for sets of 3 to 6 reps. Bench press, you're typically going to be able to train at a little bit higher intensity range. Deadlift, maybe a little bit lower intensity range, depending on frequency. And the more advanced you are, actually, the less heavy you're going to need to train in a lot of cases. Finally, as we move to the peaking phase. So the peaking phase is going to be occurring right before a powerlifting meet. Now we're into our heaviest training. So we're training 70 to 85 or 90% in general strength. Now we're going to be doing training at 85% plus intensity up to 100%, maybe 100, over 100%, whether that's with a mechanical overload tool like a reverse band or slingshot, or you just set a new PR. So it's, above at least the old 100%. So, and that's going to be for mostly sets of 1 to 3 reps. So this training is inherently very low volume. If we're just doing sets of 1 to 3 reps, you'd have to be doing a exorbitant amount of sets to equal the volume that you were doing in general strength, let alone in hypertrophy. And that's happening because these heavy weights are so stimulating to your nervous system. So there's a lot more neurological fatigue that occurs there. How many sets you need, again, individualized based on gender, age, strength, size, experience, all these different factors. The bigger and stronger you are, the less you'll typically need, because each set you're doing is so much more stimulating. When I was squatting 900 pounds, you'd have to do a lot of singles with 300 pounds to create the same kind of stimulus that I was getting out of one set of 900 pounds. So all those things need to be taken into account, how far the bar is moving based on your size, so on and so forth. Hint, hint, Juggernaut app figures it all out for you. But so we're looking at training in those 85% plus ranges for sets of 1 to 3 reps. And this training during peaking, we're, yes, driving up the weight from week to week or trending up throughout the peaking block, but also having to pay a lot of attention to the fitness fatigue relationship as you prepare for the taper for the meet, because the heavy training is so stimulating to the nervous system. You're not going to be able to do it as frequently. So this is inherently very low volume. Again, probably about 75% of the number of overloading sets that you were doing in your previous strength block. Now, what would be misapplication of this principle of overload? What you're most often going to see is that people are under-applying or underloading in hypertrophy. They're not doing enough volume to drive hypertrophic gains, or they're not training heavy enough to drive the strength gains in a general strength or peaking phase. So we want to make sure that we're training within those overloading parameters that I outlined for each phase, and that we're applying some common sense about it, because I gave you pretty big ranges, 55, 60% up to 75% for hypertrophy, but sets of 6 to 12 reps. Well, if all you're doing are 60% for sets of 6, you're going to have to do a really ton of sets to get enough of the quality work that we're doing if you're training at the low end of the reps and the low end of the intensity. So we're going to apply some common sense and know, well, if we're training at that lower intensity range, we probably need to be at the higher rep range, or vice versa. Same idea throughout all of those. And you're all smart enough to watch this YouTube channel, so you're probably smart enough to know that stuff without me even saying it. So then as we look at the other side of this, an over-application of the principle of overload, in under-application, we weren't training hard enough, we weren't training heavy enough or with enough volume. Now we're training with too much. We're doing excessive amounts of volume that are creating fatigue management issues for us, and not being able to recover, not being ready to handle the weights that we need. So if you're training, either too high of reps, too many sets at intensity ranges that aren't appropriate for the phase that you're in, or just too much volume that you're not able to effectively recover in between sessions, so you can't get the frequency of training you need to develop the technical qualities, or it's mismanaging the fitness fatigue relationship going into a powerlifting meet, those would all be over application of the principle of overload. So you're training too hard. I do see that sometimes with more beginner lifters, as they sort of let their own enthusiasm doom them in this process, and they just keep doing more and more because the training they're doing is not that hard, because they're not that strong yet. but they're unable to recover from it. So we don't want to under apply it or over apply the principle of overload. So hopefully all of this gave you a better understanding of our second scientific principle of strength training. So we've already learned about specificity. Now we learn about the principle of overload, and I have forthcoming videos about all the other important stuff. So we want to train within our overloading parameters for each phase. We don't want to under apply overload and not train hard enough or with enough volume in those phases, and we don't want to over apply it by training too heavy and not being able to manage fatigue properly. Check out those other videos that I mentioned so you can learn how to apply them based on individual differences. You know, man, woman, tall, small, big, light, advanced, beginner, and understand the implications that all of those have, how you might apply the principle of overload for yourself or for athletes that you coach. Or you could take all that thinking out of it and just sign up for a 2-week free trial of the Juggernaut AI app and get the smartest program for you, because it takes all those factors into account. So do that by visiting juggernautai.app, link down in the description. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks.